I remember opening my eyes and looking around the room. I instantly recognised my twin brother. And I just said, "Hello, Marcus." But it started to dawn on me that I didn't know where I was, I didn't know what happened to me, I didn't even know my own name. Everything had gone. There was so much to learn.
If he hadn't known who I was, then he would have been all alone in the world. But he wasn't alone in the world, he had me.
I started piecing things together. He would give me a photo, and I would construct a memory around that, and life seemed good. Privileged family, normal parents, he painted an idyllic picture. But I was never questioning anything. I had no reason to doubt it.
I, from day one, painted a picture of a normal family, but none of that was true. It was a fantasy that I was creating for him.
How could we have secrets? We don't have secrets. The one person that I absolutely trusted has betrayed me. I just cried and cried for days.
I have been lying for 20 years. I was too much of a coward. I don't know who I am.
My life is not real. My life is the one you gave me.
I've never told a living soul about what happened. But we're here now.
Here we are.
My next guests are the focal point of the Netflix documentary Tell Me Who I Am. They are twin brothers, Alex and Marcus Lewis. Gentlemen, how are you today?
We're good, yeah. We're loving being in LA. It's lovely and hot. Very different to London.
So I got to say, I was just completely blown away by this. And to know that it's the life you've lived, I mean, that's the one thing about documentaries, guys. I feel like the fact that it's a true story, the fact that somebody's actually lived these lives, it's so much more impactful. And I have to tell you, and I promise I'm not patronizing here, I've seen a lot of documentaries on Netflix. This one probably moved me the most.
Wow. Okay, well, thank you for saying that.
You know, and I have to say, it's powerful, it's emotional, it shines a light on the best and the worst of the human spirit. Just talk a little bit about, so I know it comes, just for the audience, I don't want to get ahead of myself. It comes from a 2013 book that you both wrote, correct?
Yeah, that's right, yes. We wrote that 7 years ago, yeah.
So when you write the book, is it therapeutic for you in a way, or is it just like, what is your mindset getting that book out? I mean, it's a story that certainly we are all better for hearing it, but from your mindset, how do you feel when you have the idea of getting the book out before we get to the documentary?
Well, I think we'll start off with we're another part of our life that isn't in the movie is that we're both severely dyslexic. So we didn't write a book. We had a ghostwriter called Joanna Himes, who was fantastic. She spent 2 years with us. And I went into the book because I wanted to find out who I was. And Marcus did not want to do the book because he knew where it was going to go. So that's how we started it. And the book just developed organically through. And I found out my life through writing the book.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So that was the journey we went on the book. And then Marcus obviously knew that some stuff was going to come out by doing the book. And it was very cathartic in what I learned and what I needed by writing it.
Did you guys find that because I know when it came time for the documentary too, that you both were, you were kind of in, then you were maybe, giving it some second thoughts. Now that everything is said and done, both with the book and a documentary, are you happy with your decision to tell your story?
Yeah, I mean, now, after a lot of anguish of making the movie, because I really wanted to make the movie.
This is Marcus speaking.
I'm Marcus speaking.
Yeah.
I really wanted to make the movie, and Alex didn't want to make the movie. So we kind of swapped roles on who wanted to do what. And because he had because I'd done the book for him, he had to do the movie for me. And I wanted to make the movie because I knew in my heart of hearts I hadn't really given Alex enough in the book. So the book kind of gives Alex a bit of an outline. I've given him enough information that I think is okay for him, but it's very ambiguous, and I didn't do him a good service by what I revealed in the book. So I knew there was another layer to go, and that was the layer that he wanted. So the book was an opportunity for Alex and I to reconnect ourselves completely.
Yeah, and for those listening, the story is told in 3 parts. Alex, Marcus, and then both brothers convene. For those of you listening, and I think people should watch the documentary first, and hopefully this interview second, because I think I want to talk about some things. But both are I think are a must watch and a must listen. I got to go back a little bit, guys, because I want to give the listeners and this is recorded, so if there's anything else, I can edit it out. But it starts in 1982. Alex gets into a motorcycle accident and wakes up 6 months later after a coma. I'm sorry, 6 weeks later after a coma. And basically sees Marcus and says, "Hello, Marky." Do I have that part right, guys?
Yes, that's spot on, yeah.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, and he remembers, for those of you listening, Alex remembers nothing else except Marcus's name, which is amazing in itself, I have to say, Alex. So just talk a little bit about that moment in your life, which I imagine is, enormous, that and a powerful moment in itself.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that moment is actually the beginning of my life. So I'm 18 years old. I open my eyes. I see my twin, and I know his name, and everything else is a blur. I start getting confused, and then he asks me, "Do you not know what's going on, and do you actually know what your name is?" And then that's when I started thinking, no, I don't know my name, but I know your name, and I know you're my twin. And then there's a part, the next stage of that in my memory is this woman is running around the bed, and she's getting hysterical because I've woken up and I've been unconscious for so long, and she was really stressing me out. And I said to Marcus, "Why is that woman? Who is she?" And he said, "That's our mother." And that's how my life started. And I'd never met her.
That's amazing. And I have to say, Marcus, what do you have a take on that as well, or were you surprised that he knew your name when he woke up?
No, not at all. So as twins, and there will be twins listening to this who understand that we operate on 110% identical twins. So you have siblings who work on 100% connection, and then twins work on 110. And the 10% is an extra bond that identical twins have. That's just our take on it. It's not a scientific thing. And so because we operate in that 10%, I was, first of all, convinced that he was going to wake up. Everybody told me that he was going to be brain damaged. He was going to have severe problems. Maybe he would never wake up. I knew 100% he was going to wake up, he was going to be fine, and he was going to know who I was. And all of those things happened exactly as I believed them to. So I was relatively relaxed about the whole thing, and I was there when he woke up. And it was a very, I knew it was going to happen, so it wasn't an amazing thing for me. It was just what I was expecting.
Yeah, and many twins would agree with you with that bond and that, that kinship for sure. And just for those of you listening, and guys, please correct me anytime you feel I'm incorrect. You come from a wealthy family. Distant relatives includes the Prime Minister, Clement Attlee. Am I right with that?
That's correct, yeah. So my mother was a second removed niece or something like that.
Yeah, it's quite far removed. But we're connected. We're part of the Attlee family.
Gotcha. And mom passes in 1963. Your biological father passes when you're 3 days old. Do I have that correct as well?
So our real father, he came to pick us up from the hospital, and they've been trying to have kids for 7 years, and finally he got his two twin boys. I was sick a little bit, so they kept me in the hospital. He picked up Alex and my mum, and then on the way home, he had a car accident, went through the windscreen, and he died, and Alex lived.
Wow.
So it was a very hard beginning. So Alex was actually in multiple head injuries from the day he was 3 days old, and then he hit his head in the same place when he was 18 again. So it happened to him twice.
Oh my goodness! And if that wasn't a documentary, I missed it. I watched it twice, and I tried to get all my facts. But that's unbelievable. And I don't want to go. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's not actually in the documentary. That's in the book.
Good. I want to make sure I didn't miss it because I was going to say, and that's an unbelievable thing. And and I'm going to go out of order here a little bit. So, actually, let me save that question for the end, because, Marcus, oftentimes I hear the word deception, betrayal, coward, and a lot of times you're laying these words on yourself. I feel you're awfully hard on yourself, Marcus. And Alex, I'm not going to let that go. I'm going to talk from your perspective too, but I do feel, Marcus, you're very, very hard on yourself, because you mentioned the kinship and bond with your brother, and I have to say, I feel like you were trying to protect him, and it's easy for me to say because I'm not living either of your lives. But I have to say, when I'm watching this, I see it as an act of kindness, and I'll admit it. My face was flooded with tears, for both of you. It's just such an unbelievable story. But you are anything but a coward, somebody who practices in deception. At least that's my view, Marcus. I never even once thought that. I thought the exact opposite.
Yeah, I guess for me, being an identical twin, to lie to your identical twin is a very serious thing to do, and I didn't have the courage to tell him these facts later. So it was. I felt like a coward, and I had to say, after the movie is finished and we've got to the end of the process and we now have closure between us, I don't feel like that. But at the time of making the movie and going through these emotional things live on camera, that was how I was feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, and I turned to my longtime girlfriend at the time. I said, my God, he's living with this baggage of having experienced just these horrors. And then add on top of that how you're trying to protect Alex from having to live that same nightmare. Yeah, my goodness, man, I think the world of you. I think your heart was in the right place. Now, obviously, with any documentary, people could go back and forth with it, but I don't think anyone argues the fact that you're just a wonderful human being.
Yeah, and for me, it wasn't really till that moment at the end, to when we finally get closure, I never realized quite how the enormity and the sacrifice that Marcus made, and that just. I just looked at it in a different way. So he was prepared to do all of that for me. It was just unbelievable.
Yeah, and Alex, it's easy for me to say, and I meant every single word of I think the world of Marcus, but I also didn't live it like you lived it. So I can understand how at the time you were certainly angry. I get that part of it too. This isn't a documentary, I think, where it has a right. It's a beautiful story in a sense of your bond, of your love for each other. That's where I love this story, and it's just such a wonderful documentary. But Alex, it's easy for me to say, this is, Marcus was in the right, but you had to live this. This was your life.
Yes, it was my life, and I don't think Marcus really appreciated how difficult my life was, living in a world where you don't know anything and you're desperately trying to find out what's true, what isn't true, what's real, what isn't real. So that takes up an enormous amount of energy, and it's very costly mentally to live in that world, in that space, which the film does explore, and it gives the audience a chance to have a little inkling into what it's like to live in that world.
Do the two of you believe that your father, your biological father, knew the ways of your mother, or do you think that was something he was not aware of the same way your stepfather was not aware of it?
They were much younger then, so I don't believe he would have known that.
Our biological father would have been,
yes, the timeline did. But I guess let me clarify that a little bit. Not so much the acts towards you guys, but the acts of the way she was very open and I don't know the right way to phrase it, but the way her demeanor with other men and so forth. Do you think he was aware of that type of behavior? I guess that's what I mean. Not so much the abuse towards you, because that obviously wouldn't work out, but.
We didn't know our real father, but we've heard lots of amazing stories about him. He's the best father in the world because he can be whatever we want him to be, which is also a really amazing thing to have. But we always found out that, he was a very quiet guy. So my mum was the loud one and he was the quiet one behind her. So he was kind of always slightly behind my mum, is from the stories that we've heard. Whereas our father was the opposite man. He was a very our stepfather. We call him our father in the documentary because we called him our father. We didn't know anything else. So he was a very aggressive man, a very loud man, a very powerful man, a very, very difficult man, and so. I believe that he was quite different to our real father.
Marcus, when you refused to forgive him, because I know Alex forgives. I know when he was your stepfather was passing on, he was he wanted your forgiveness. To make a long story short, I know, Alex, you're kind, and at the time you were just like, yeah, I forgive you. And Marcus, you didn't want to give him that forgiveness. Is it just because he just wasn't a good man, very cold, very kind of cut off from you guys in the world? Is that the reason why? And if you don't want to answer it, that's fine too.
No, I mean, he didn't treat us very well. We weren't his kids, so we were sort of second-class citizens. He put zero effort into us. We'd have to go into the study and call him sir, shake his hand good night. We'd always stand up when he came in a room. He never gave us a hug. When Alex was in the hospital, he never came to visit him once. I mean, he was a cruel man. So I just didn't want to forgive him for the way that he treated us when we were children. I was 30 years old. No, I wasn't. I was less. 25 years old. I was a man, and I decided that, I wasn't going to give him that. He hadn't been nice to me, and I wasn't going to let him go, die. I mean, he died a couple of days later, and I just said, no, I'm not going to do that. And that was very hard for Alex, because I was now living in this false life where I was, saying to Alex, our parents are wonderful. And so I was playing and play acting this whole thing the whole time to give him that life. And then I had to forgive my father in front of him. So it went against the grain of the story that I was creating for Alex. And so I found myself in a position where I couldn't lie to Alex. I mean, I could have lied and said, I forgive him, to complete the story for Alex, but I wasn't capable of doing that. And I wasn't going to give him, my father, that. So I said no.
No, that's well stated. And let me ask you guys, do you think, there's no other way to ask this, do you think your mother was happy to some degree that Alex had lost his memory? So at least one of her children could forget those atrocities that she put him through, or do you think she didn't think like that? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, just grateful that he doesn't remember, at least one of her children doesn't remember what she put them through, or do you think that didn't even matter to her?
I think that would be the logistical way of thinking of it, but it wasn't, strangely enough.
No, she was furious. She never accepted that he lost his memory.
She seemed very bothered.
That's right. Yes, you're right.
But it actually would have been much. I agree with you. I still don't, to this day, think that that would have been very convenient for her, but it didn't seem to be. She was bothered by that.
Yeah, and let me ask, if the tables were turned, Alex, what would you have done?
I think I would have done exactly the same.
Yeah.
And I think I would have protected him equally myself. Whether I would have had enough strength to do it as far in as he did, I don't know. But just to have the courage to go and make that decision to alter my life on his journey,
to give him a free ride,
to give me he calls it a free ride. So I was given a free ride.
Yeah, and I see that part of it. And I think it was Marcus that said this, and it was in an interview, it wasn't a documentary. You said the perception is different in England versus the States in what you should have done and what you shouldn't have done. And before you answer that, I'm going to say that I don't care where you live. It's always easy to look back in the rearview mirror and then decide what you should have done. But at that moment, when you're living life, that's where it's most difficult. But I guess my question to you is, and even Alex, if you can answer this too, is the perception different from what, Marcus should have done in England versus the States?
No, I meant it in the sense that, in England, we are very, very tight-lipped. We don't really say what we mean. We're always very polite, and we don't really show our emotions. And in America, you're the opposite. So you're very open. Everyone does therapy. You talk to each other in an open way. You hug each other. And so therefore, you are a very different and open society. And in England, we're a very closed society. So I feel that the perception of what you should have done and what you shouldn't have done is very different in the two countries.
Yeah, and in the documentary, one of the big turning points is the Alex's discovery of that terrible photograph. Talk a little bit about that. Is it tough to watch this documentary and kind of see that again? And I know it's your documentary and you're doing the talking. I get all that. But it's different to watch it, I have to believe, when it's right in front of you. Do you have to, that photograph or any other memory, was it difficult for you to rewatch some of that? I would imagine it would be.
It took us probably five screenings to sit through the entire thing without having to walk out or have the screening stopped.
Wow.
And I'm still struggling. I'm probably 20 screenings in now, and I still tense up and start jiggling my legs, and Alex has to put his hand on me to keep calm in the middle of the documentary.
Yeah.
It's still a very difficult watch for me. Yeah.
So you both have wonderful families. The documentary goes on to point that out, and you're both loving fathers. Did what you go through as, the abuse you went through, did that, and this is going to sound awkward, but there's really no other way to say it, did that make you better parents, having learned from just the torment you went through? Did it affect your lives and raising a family? I hope that question makes sense in any way.
Yeah, I mean, it does make sense. I mean, if we're really honest, we are probably a little too soft on our kids. We're probably not. My wife does all the discipline because I let them have a bit of a free rein because I didn't have that. I'm kind of so it does alter the way that you bring up your kids, and you want them to have the opposite life that you had.
Yeah. And not ever have any problems.
And not ever have any problems in their life and become a little bit overprotective. So we have to be conscious that, just because we had a bad time, we can't overplay it and try and change the outcome of their lives.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I have to say, I think it was Alex that said this, and I might be wrong. It said, children will accept anything because they love their parents. And that is so true in your story. And it's really true with children and in many abuse cases where they're so loving and accepting and, innocent, and your story just kind of is just proof positive of that. And it's just it shines a light on a lot of things. I feel like your story. Yes, it's a story about two wonderful brothers who have this bond that is amazing, but it's also about, abuse, and it's about lives because of wealth, and that doesn't change things. It's kids are susceptible to this everywhere, and it still goes on. And it's just got me thinking in a lot of ways, guys. And I think the documentary does that. Don't you feel the same way?
Yeah, I think that it's one of another reason we wanted to make it is that England has a very big class structure in it. Not that you don't really have so much in America, and in England, abuse and children who have been abused and the programs that are on the radio or television or the news is always kind of based. I'm generalizing here a little bit, on kind of lower income, uneducated families. And we wanted to stand up and say, you know what, that's rubbish. It happens in every society, at every level, at the high societies, people with money, all the way down to very uneducated people. So it's got nothing to do with that. It happens in different race of people, in different colors, and everything. So it runs through the span all the way through. And I think we just wanted to voice that and let people know that this is something that happens everywhere.
Was that the actual house in the documentary, the actual home?
No, it wasn't the actual home. We tried to make it in our house, and the people who own the property, because we sold it, were uncomfortable with the subject of the documentary. So that they refused to allow us to which is obviously their right. It was their house. So they went out and found a very similar to house to ours.
Now, your mother's the hiding of money, was that a byproduct of her hoarding, or was it like save for rainy? What was that? The hoarding part?
It's the hoarding part. Our mother was a hoarder, so she had, she hoarded 200 cartons of cigarettes. She had jam jars. She had antiques. She had newspapers. She hoarded everything, and the money thing was just another version of that. So that was an illness she had for sure. The hoarding. Yeah.
Has anybody reached out to you and I don't want to say thanked you? Yeah, thanks is an appropriate word. Thanked you for telling your story. Has anybody, a victim of abuse, reached out to either one of you and said, thank you for this? I've been through similar. Your story really, have you guys experienced that yet?
We started this journey off in Telluride Film Festival, and we did screenings to about 500 people, and we'd have probably 100 people come up to us afterwards and hug us. We call them American hugs. I mean it. They were so nice and so genuine. And we would have probably 30 to 40 people a day tell us and thank us for doing it, and tell us what they'd done, or tell us something in their life. And then in quite a few cases, people are already saying, if you can do it, I can do it. I'm going to go home and do something about it. So we left Telluride, first of all, uplifted by the
love and the support we got from the people who were watching the documentary. And secondly, realizing the power of this movie, which we hadn't really grasped until we did the first festival, was that, people were telling us that we have changed their life. And I'm going to go home and I'm going to tell my wife, I'm going to tell my husband, I'm going to tell my kids, and actually get them on a different journey. And so we really realized that this is resonating massively with so many people on so many different levels. And it really is changing people's lives already, and we haven't even released the movie yet.
Yeah, and I have to say, it's therapeutic from a sense that you told your story, and it's like I mentioned, it's just an amazing story. But like you guys have said, this is 100 people, and it hasn't been released yet. This is amazing, and I think that's what a good documentary do. It not only just tells the story, but you've affected and you've touched people, and I have to believe, gentlemen, that means the world to you.
Yeah. It's an amazing feeling to feel that you can put something back into society.
I feel like this is one of those documentaries that over time will be shown at universities or schools or just everywhere, places where therapy goes on. And I just feel like this is one of those ripple effect films, if that makes any sense. And I just consider myself so fortunate to be able to watch it. I think you guys are in for such a wave of positivity in front of you. I think you're going to get a lot more American hugs and maybe hugs from other places around the world too, because I think you're both very, very likable and you're very honest and you're just genuine guys. I loved everything about it.
Oh, thank you. And I think it's and we've spoken to a lot of charities, and we've been working with the National Association of People Abused in Childhood, which is a big charity running in the UK, and they want to use this movie as a tool. They want to use it to train their staff and to show victims and to just explain to people how stuff happens in families. So they're already saying exactly what you've said. People will try and take this and use it.
But most of all, we learned, having made it and let people watch it, that we want to start a conversation. That's the main thing we want to do with this movie. Yes, we can change people's lives, but we also want to start a conversation, start a Me Too movement, so to speak, in the sense that, we want someone to watch this documentary and then go to a dinner party and say, wow, I watched this incredible documentary and this was the subject, and actually have a conversation at a dinner party with a friend about sexual abuse.
Which no one ever does.
We know doesn't happen. People do not discuss this subject. And then that person who you've known for 30 years says, you know what, I was abused. Really? I didn't know that. And then they can have a connection and a conversation, and then that can ripple out, and all their friends can find out, and then their life is, they're lifted, they're free, they're not hiding anymore. And I believe that if we can in some way just start the seed of a conversation around the world, we've done something amazing.
Oh, I completely agree. And it's getting off that big burden on those shoulders that many people carry with them every day, and they have no outlet. But you guys took a huge risk. And I'm leaving certain details of the documentary out of this interview because I want people to see it and watch it for the first time. I don't want to spoil it for people. But I'm going to say that you guys took a huge risk. And you could tell it's difficult for both of you. But, especially when Marcus can't tell you, face to face, and I totally get why, the abuse that you guys went through. Marcus had, for those of you listening, Marcus had to record it, and then Alex came in and watched it, and I can't even imagine, Alex, what went through your mind watching that, because one, your brother is so, just emotional that he can't tell you that he has to record it. That's got to be stunning. Plus what he's saying, it's just, that had to be a very powerful moment for you, for both of you.
It was an unbelievable moment. It was unbelievable moment for Marcus to actually get to a space where he could say it. Okay, I saw it on a laptop, but and it was my reaction to it was lessened by the fact that the information I had a monster in my head. I had 20 scenarios of what happened in that house all those years ago. And all I wanted him to do was actually tell me in a 4-minute monologue what happened. So when he came back, I was kind of like, okay, so I've got it. So I wasn't surprised by it, because the book, when we wrote the book, he gave me a certain amount of information. So I had a lot of that information already from the book, but he didn't. But what I actually really wanted him to do was tell me from himself rather than somebody writing it down. So it was just...
He needed the details. It's like a jigsaw of a puzzle. When you've lost everything, you've got to put all the bits in. And I hadn't realized that there was still a bit missing. That was the bit he needed for us to reconnect. so that we could then finally have closure after all these years. And that's what we got at the end of the movie. And it was a gift for us. You know, these guys, I mean, Ed, the producer, Simon and Ed, they given us a gift. They gave us an ability to get our connection back again after so many years. And it was really, really an amazing gift to give us.
Yeah, I can't say that I'm overly religious, but I could say that this movie is a blessing in a variety of ways. And I just have a few more questions if you guys don't mind answering them. You guys are so much fun to talk to. I really appreciate your time. One of them is, people don't realize, and I think they do realize, but it was a lot of I just kind of hinted at it, high risk just putting yourselves out there like this. Like, that's not easy. I mean, not only in the book, but, then in the documentary, I can't imagine it's easy opening yourself up for the world to see. That's got to be tough on so many levels.
Yeah, I think it was really, really tough, but in a strange way, and I think people find it hard to understand how the hell we did that. But actually, I was so bent on finding the truth that I was prepared to go to those lengths to get it. So in a way, we trusted him so much. We only had 4 people in the room. We wouldn't let a full crew come in, which would be 30 or 40 people on a film set normally. We only had 4, so we felt safe. We got to know them over 5 years. So it wasn't, this wasn't an easy journey we did. It wasn't easy, and it took years for us to trust them.
And we actually pulled out of this movie like 3 or 4 times, once actually a week before shooting.
Yeah.
Because we were too scared to do it. And then eventually
what we did was, it was very, very difficult, and it almost didn't happen. I mean, it took every ounce of courage from both of us to just get up there and do that. And even now we look at it and say, geez, did we really do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sometimes we watch the documentary and can't actually believe that that's us talking, and that was us actually doing it, because we got ourselves into a space to allow ourselves to do it, and then we drew it back again a bit. So it's all a surprise to watch the movie.
And I'm going to tell Ed this. The way, so the story aside, the way the documentary looks, it's so beautifully shot. Like, a story aside, just visually, it's just such, like, the scenery, it's just so well done. It's so hard to express in words because it sounds like I'm patronizing, being over the top, but it's really a beautiful, just a scenic. It just looks like it's just a well-made documentary. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, one of the main things that when we started this project, we found Simon. I mean, Simon Chin has won 2 Oscars for documentaries. So he knew we're talking about, a serious player here. Ed, the director, he's a young man, but he's already been Oscar nominated. So we're dealing with people who are professional, they know what they're doing. And we looked him in the eye and we said, you know what, if we're going to do this and we're going to put ourselves out there, this has to be the most amazing documentary that you can make. We're not interested in making a documentary that's okay and it's going to go out on telly in the afternoon. We didn't want to do that. We either did it amazingly or we didn't do it at all. And they delivered. They've made something incredible. The craft that they've used is off the charts for us.
Yeah, and my last couple of questions are, one of them is, if you guys could do anything differently, whether it's in your lives, or is there anything that you'd want to do over again, or are the way things unfolded just the way they unfolded? Is there anything you have a regret with, or?
Yeah, my regret, and I have to live with that, is that when I would have done everything right up to the age of 32, my mother died. Alex found out that I'd lied to him and I'd given this false life. And he was upset with me for probably a couple of weeks. He was very angry. And then we kind of settled down and started talking to each other about it. And I just said to him, our mother abused us, that's it. And I gave him nothing more. And we should have had this chat that we had live on camera that you see in the documentary 20 years before. And then Alex wouldn't have had to go through 20 years of anguish. So that bit I would have definitely changed.
Is there anything, if your mother was, your mother's passing obviously almost gives a green light for all this healing to begin, I think. Is there anything, if she was still alive, well, I know what Marcus would have said, but is there anything you would say to your mother, because Marcus is very abrupt about what he would say to Mom if she was alive. Is there anything you guys would say to her today outside of the obvious? Or is it just, could you ever forgive her? How do you move forward? Is it just the bond itself?
Well, it's interesting because, I'm not a religious man. God never got into my life. And so therefore, I believe in myself. and I believe that we have capacity to love ourselves, to love people around us, and also I feel I have a right to not forgive my mother. I don't believe that I have to forgive my mother to feel better. Lots of therapists say, you've got to forgive your mother, otherwise you can never move on. Well, I don't believe that that's true. I've made this movie. I feel very passionate about it, and I also believe I've got every right not to forgive my mother. So that's where I sit.
Finally, thank you both for coming on and sharing this amazing and selfless story. It's a story that's going to positively affect so many lives moving forward. Your courage to come out and just share this story with the world is truly humanity at its very best.
Well, thank you so much for having us, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for having us on your show.
That was Alex and Marcus Lewis, and it's not very often in an interview where I can interview both the focal points and the director of the documentary, and that's exactly what we have here. I would like to welcome director Ed Perkins to the show. Ed, thank you so much for giving me a moment of your time. It's been a hectic day for you guys. Ed, how are you?
I'm really well, thanks. How are you?
Good. So I have questions for you, and I appreciate you sitting. And I was very blessed with the opportunity to talk to Alex and Marcus, and boy, are they likable. I was just thrilled to get a chance to talk to them.
They're extraordinary people, and it's been a genuine privilege on all our part to be involved in this because of that.
Yeah, and it's rare to get a documentary where I don't want to call them subjects. I'm going to say the focal points of the documentary, but also get the director. So this is just such a wonderful opportunity.
I don't call them subjects because it's a word that we struggle with enormously. Subjects or subject matter, or even a contributor. They're Alex and Marcus, and it's their story.
Right. I feel like I'm in a science lab. I'm saying subjects. Like I feel ridiculous saying that.
And they're friends now. Proudly. And
yes.
It's been a real journey for all of us.
Yeah, and it's just I'm blessed to have you. I'm blessed to have Alex and Marcus, because it is. And I was telling the gentleman it's just such a wonderful documentary. Before I get into the story, and I said this, so I don't want to be too repetitive, but Ed, the way it looks, it's just forget the story aside. The way the cinematography looks, it's just stunning. Like I've never seen a documentary seemingly take so much pride in the way it looks. And I'm not saying the story or the writing or any of the other stuff. It just looks great. Does that make any sense, or am I gushing here for no reason?
No, well, you're gushing about the work of an incredible DOP called Eric Wilson, who did a beautiful and really sensitive job with the visuals, and we spent a lot of time. This has been a film, I'm sure the guys said, but we first met I think over 5 years ago. So this is a film that's been sort of percolating around our minds for many years, and we've had a long time to think about how best to tell this story. And I think actually that long gestation period, that whatever it was, 3.5, 4 years before we even picked up a camera, has been absolutely critical, not just in allowing us to build a relationship of trust, but also just allowing us to figure out what the essence of the story was. What was the story that we really wanted to tell, and what form would be best to tell that story.
Yeah, and I have to say, for those of you listening, I am speaking with Ed Perkins. He's an Academy Award-nominated director who's also done Garrett's Gold, Black Sheep, Searching for Sugar. Before I get into this story, Ed,
I wish I had, but I didn't direct Searching for Sugar Man. I did get a chance to work on I made the behind-the-scenes featurette for that film.
That's right. That's what I meant. Yes.
My career, that was sort of my film school, in a sense, was working on that and The Imposter and Project Nim, and learning from those extraordinary directors about how they approach telling their stories. And in some ways, I feel like this Tell Me Who I Am is the film in which I'm trying to take some of those approaches, those filmmaking approaches, and apply it to a new story.
And you're putting together, you mentioned learning from the best, and you're really putting together just a wonderful filmography, and the storytelling. For you, Ed, when it comes to this story came to you, and we'll talk in a second how, but what makes a good story to you? I mean, obviously it's the importance of the story, it's the subjects, it's everything. But to you, what do you look for? I mean, specifically, is there something that when you see a story, is it human interaction? Is it many things? What is it for you, Ed?
Well, I actually try not to. I try not to deconstruct it and analyze it too much, if I'm totally honest. But I guess what I do know that if you're going to spend many years of your life on a story, on a film, it deserves to be a film and a story that you found totally obsessive, that you can't really imagine not making. And that's how I felt about this story. And when I first heard about this story by reading an article in a British newspaper about their life, and I, like a lot of people who would have read that article, I was just totally captivated by these big sort of philosophical ideas that the film raises, and also the fact that it does play out like a psychological thriller. It really does, and yet it's true. It really is kind of one of those stranger than fiction stories, and it felt like a story that needed to be done correctly and approached with the sort of sensitivity that it deserved. And if I'm totally honest, I wasn't sure back then. I think I was sort of 27 when I first met Alex and Marcus. I wasn't sure, and Simon and I talked at length about whether I was ready to tell this story, whether I had the right skill set at that point to tell this story. And in a way, the fact that it then took 3.5, 4 years before we picked up a camera was really helpful, because I do feel like I made some other films in that time and was able to try things out and try different interview techniques out. And I became a better filmmaker, a more matured person. And hopefully that's allowed the film to be, the film that it is today.
Yeah, and how long did this take? Not from when you met Alex and Marcus, but how long did it take you to shoot once you had the idea in mind to completion? What was that time span?
I think it was somewhere between a year and 18 months to shoot and edit, and it was a long edit. It's a complicated film, and Alex and Marcus's lives, they're very rich, fulfilled lives, and they have endless anecdotes, and trying, I'm really interested at the moment, and did so on Black Sheep, my previous film, trying to boil a story down to its essence, so that the themes that you think are most important rise to the top, and also to try and tell stories that really embrace nuance and ambiguity, and that have layers and depth, and that don't try and wrap everything up, but leave audiences thinking and feeling, questioning the themes that the film brings up. And what was so fascinating about this story in particular is it's not a film just about one thing. It's a film about brotherly love and the blurring of fact and fiction and the things we do in order to survive. It's a film sort of about the way in which sometimes it's easier to believe a lie than to admit the truth, and that always felt to me like a really complicated and interesting idea that we all sort of recognize in our own lives in some way. We all know how that feels, and it's a film that has big philosophical ideas, and we felt the audience would hopefully resonate with them.
I have to tell you, Ed, this film really got to me. I mean, and the boys mentioned how many people are victims of abuse, and I'm not saying I'm a victim of abuse, but I will say that this movie just touched me. I just feel like the ripple effect with this film. I don't know, I saw it, I want to say last week, and I haven't stopped thinking about it. Like I just and I got to tell you, Ed, and maybe this is just me being stubborn. I get really upset at, and I get what Alex went through, but I get really upset at backlash towards Marcus, because here's somebody who knows everything, who knows what happened, and is dealing with his own pain, but in his heart of hearts is protecting his brother, and that's double. It's double the baggage. It's double the pain. I don't know. To me, that's almost, and I'm sorry if this is the wrong word, it's almost heroic.
It is heroic, and I hope I feel immensely proud to have been a part of this project, because I think Alex and Marcus are extraordinary human beings, genuinely. For anyone who sits down and talks on camera and bears their soul, far braver than I am and will ever be. But given the sensitivities involved in this story, to show such openness and honesty and a willingness to be vulnerable is utterly, genuinely kind of mind-blowing to me. And there's I learned a huge amount throughout the making of this film, but one thing that I've learned is, if you've gone through the things that they've gone through as kids, and Marcus talks about this in the film, the feelings of guilt and shame and fear, real fear, can make you silent for days and weeks and years and actually in their case decades of being silent, and because you're too scared to talk, and that makes what they've done even more extraordinary. And if it can help someone, if someone can see, it's a film that inevitably has to go to dark and complicated places, but ultimately we all hope that it's also a film that will leave audiences feeling hopeful and feeling inspired. But if these guys can tell me, and through me and the camera, tell lots of people about their story, then perhaps someone out there can watch what they've done and feel inspired and find someone to talk to and share their burden and feel catharsis and feel a bit lighter. And I think that would be an extraordinary effect of what they've done.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I have to say, the film's roughly 90 minutes, and it goes by so quick. And it's, I feel like at the end of the movie, I feel like I know these two guys. Like I felt like I've lived with these guys my whole life, and they are so likable. They are so, and it's like I don't want to say you live their pain, because I can't even imagine what that is, but you're with these two. You love these two guys. You cheer. I don't want to say cheer for them, but you're sympathetic to them. You want them. You want the best for both. The film does a wonderful job of just crafting that bond, and obviously it's a pure bond, which helps. But I don't know. At the end, I felt just drawn and just, I don't know, like these two are. I've known these two forever.
Yeah. Well, it's an extraordinary skill they have, and it's been amazing. We've done a couple of film festivals now. We premiered the film at Telluride Film Festival, and it was astonishing. But by the end of the weekend at Telluride, we couldn't walk down the main road at Telluride without Alex and Marcus being stopped endlessly by people who wanted to give them a hug and wanted to tell them about the story and wanted to say thank you for what they've done and how their story resonated with people. And one of the joys for us is that, away from the film, away from the studio that we built, like we've got to know Alex and Marcus as fathers, as husbands, and they live, they'll be too humble to have told you this, but they live unbelievably fulfilled and emotionally rich lives. And it's so, on a personal note, so inspiring to see the way they parent their own kids and the way they approach life and the way they steadfastly refuse to be victims and refuse to be defined by what's happened in their childhood. And what they've gone through is more than you'd ever wish on anyone. And yet they're some of the happiest, most positive, lovable people you could possibly wish to meet. And actually that's a testament both to themselves as individuals, but also to their relationship as identical twins. And it really has been. It'd be easy for this to sound kind of pat and twee, but it has been. Sometimes when you make these films, it can feel, it's just a day job. And then sometimes you really feel like you're making something, and you have the privilege of being invited into someone's life, and you get to witness moments in their life that are really profound and important. And that's how this film has felt to all of us who have been involved.
Yeah, and Marcus is pretty straightforward, and I forget how the scene unfolds, but you're right. They refuse to be victims, and he basically says it with colorful language to his mother. Basically, you don't get to do this to me, and I love that attitude. And you answered kind of my next question too. Is it so with like you always see these movie sets where these people that just generate movies just to get movies out? I would imagine, and you touched on this a little bit, but it's got to be tough to shoot a movie like this, not just because you developed this, and you mentioned this, the bond with these guys, and you watch their families. I don't want to say, does that get in the way of filmmaking, but does that even inspire you more? Not that you need it, but like, how does it affect you? Does it affect you professionally? Does it boost you in any way? The bond you develop?
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be human if it didn't. And making films like this it's a real privilege, but it is also a responsibility. And we knew that, one of the nice things about having those 2 or 3 or 4 years, or whatever it was, before cameras came out of bags, just talking, is we were able to explore kind of, not only we were able to build a bond, but explore what this film is really about. What's the essence of this film? And it became clear to Simon and I think, that there was as close as these guys were, that there was something unresolved. There was still something between them, and there was a desire, albeit with a huge amount of trepidation, to try to find a way to have the conversation that they hadn't been able to have in that way, before. And so every decision we made really was, how do we build a space, in this case a studio space, in which those kind of conversations and that level of disclosure can happen. And you make a promise to someone when you meet them, and you say that you're interested in their story and would love to be part of bringing it to screen. You make a promise that you're going to tell their story truthfully and with the sensitivity it deserves. And one of the things I'm most proud of from a filmmaking point of view is not the film at all. It's the fact that, we're in Los Angeles at the moment together as a team, as me and Simon and Alex and Marcus as a team who have gone through, and there's lots of people, behind the scenes who have done extraordinary work, and we've built this bond and gone through this thing together. And one of the things we did, which I haven't done on previous projects, is we sort of ended up taking the role of sort of de facto amateur therapist, given the nature of the interviews, and of course I'm not a therapist at all, but what I did do, which I found so helpful, was to spend time with real therapists, trained therapists beforehand, and really kind of tried to learn about how to navigate Alex and Marcus through this process safely, without re-traumatization, and that's been so helpful to me, and it also informed everything we did. That whole studio space that we built, that very sort of unnatural, sort of quite clinical studio space, all of that was kind of conscious. We want to I think the kind of documentaries that I'm interested in making, they are to a lesser or greater degree constructs, and we wanted to own that. Like, we wanted to be transparent about the artifice and show you right in that pre-title, right at the beginning of the film. We wanted to show you the lights. We wanted to show you them walking in, having the drink of water, the cameras. We want to own all that space. And yet within that space, it was imperative for us that Alex and Marcus knew that they had full control, and that they had full agency, and that they were able to tell their story in their own words at their own pace.
Yeah, you said a couple things there that just well said. The family atmosphere, whether it's the publicity crew I've been talking to, they're phenomenal. The Netflix family, you guys, it's just, it works so well. And, I have to say, is there a moment that caught you off guard? Ed, is there a moment, I'm sure there's many, but was there a moment when filming that even you weren't expecting? I know there's things that drop in, obviously, in the story.
There was one in particular, and I don't know whether Alex and Marcus talked about this, but in some ways the heart of the film, is that really extraordinary moment where Marcus talks and gives that monologue, and it was kind of an amazing thing to witness, because he spoke, as you see in the film, for 3.5 minutes, something like that, and it felt it feels to me a little bit like that was sort of, those words, those feelings had just been sitting for many, many years there, and to be able to kind of witness that and was very emotional. It was a very emotional set. But what you don't see in the film is the conversation that happened just before Marcus gave that monologue, and I think it was on day 4 or 5 of our interviews, and I asked Marcus, would you be willing to tell me what happened to you in your childhood? Would you be willing to tell me what your mum did to you? And despite many years of us sort of talking around the themes of the film and how we wanted to approach it, Marcus, his response was kind of, well, I didn't think we were actually going to have to go there. I didn't think you were actually going to ask that question. Can't we just talk around it? Can't we just allude to it? And the way Marcus talks about it now is that he, I think, still felt that maybe he could get through the process of making the film without quite going to that place. And what was really interesting is he then challenged us, the filmmakers. He said, give me a good reason why I should say those things, why I should go to that place that I found so difficult to go to. And it took us back, and our response was, you don't have to say anything at all. You don't have to say anything, but if you want to talk, I'm here and I'll listen. And his response was, well, that's not good enough. That won't make me talk. You're going to have to come up with a better reason than that. Otherwise, we're not going to go anywhere. And again, our response was kind of like, you don't have to say anything, but if you want to, I'm here and I'll listen. And there was it went on for, it felt, 10, 15 minutes, just this back and forth of Marcus trying to figure out whether he wanted to use that opportunity, that time, that place as the place to say the things that he did. And it was his decision, and he did it in his time. And we felt very, very privileged and very emotional to be there to see that.
Ed, there's times in this film where I wish it was fiction, because you mentioned the boys are, they're brave, they're strong, they're courageous, and thank God they told this story, because I don't know how many people could have lived the hell on earth that they did, especially Marcus, and live to tell their story and inspire other people and make the quality of life better for others. So in that way alone, they're just so special.
I think that you've said it so beautifully there. Yeah, it is astonishing. They don't know how amazing it is, because it's just their life to them.
Yeah.
But what they have done is astonishing. And the other fascinating thing was, because for so many years they haven't talked to each other, we were, as filmmakers, A, playing this role of sort of amateur therapist, but B, playing the role of kind of mediator, really, because, the way we structured these interviews, Alex and I would sit in the interview room for 4 hours in the morning and talk, and then we'd all have lunch together with Marcus, and we'd talk about anything other than their life. And then in the afternoon, Marcus and I would speak for 4 hours, but Alex and Marcus weren't talking about the things they were talking to me about. And so Alex was sort of, in essence saying, there's one thing I need, and that's my brother just to tell me the truth, just to give me that last puzzle piece, just to say everything and tell me and leave nothing on the table, and then we can move on. But Marcus didn't know that that's what his brother needed, because they weren't having that conversation. And a lot of people who've seen the film they struggle to sort of understand that. Of course they must have talked. They must every day have gone home and called each other and talked. That's not how they operate as people, as identical twins. And there was this kind of gulf of understanding. And part of our role was trying to figure out how to mediate that and allow for a conversation that I think they both deep down knew they wanted to have, but neither was able to say to the other one, hey, let's just sit down and talk. They weren't able, they didn't do that, and they haven't done that.
Yeah, and when because I've been raving about this documentary, when I talk to people about it and I say how awful their mother was, I don't think I ever have the words to, however awful I describe her, she's worse. And I don't, like I said, I don't want to harp on this, but the fact that these two stepped up and did this act of kindness, I told them the ripple effect with this is going to extend for miles. I mean, people are going to be affected by this, that's where I would have a tough time as a director, just watching this unfold. And the difference is, for you, Ed, you're watching lives unfold, that's a huge responsibility. Like, that's not just directing a soap opera. It's not directing an episode of The Walking Dead. This is something completely different entirely. This has a level of responsibility that is meant for the right hands. And boy, did you do a good job handling that responsibility.
Oh, thank you. Well, one of the other things that was really interesting when Marcus and I had that back and forth, one of the other things I did say, other than continually repeating, you don't have to talk unless you want to, it was at some point I think I said, forget about the film. The film doesn't matter. And that sounds like a really sort of pat thing to say, but actually in the moment it was totally true, because when you build these relationships for many years, Marcus and Alex often talk about the idea that the camera, when they were in the studio space, the camera disappeared. But sort of the same thing happened for me. We were talking for hours and hours and hours and hours, and you sort of forget anything other than the interaction you're having. And it was a very really unique process. I haven't been through anything like that, and part of that is the long gestation period and building trust. The other part of it was on a project like documentary feature doc, you might get a day, you might get 2 days to interview. We were talking for 6, 7, 8 days, and in that time, you're just able to approach things and emotions and ideas with a level of detail that is very difficult often, and yet their story and the issues involved deserve that level of detail. It's a complicated story, a very nuanced story, and I'm just immensely thankful that the team, our amazing team at Lightbox, supported by Netflix, was able to provide that space, and time for those conversations to happen.
He is director Ed Perkins. Ed, I have to tell you, you're a gifted filmmaker. I look forward to years of of your work. But most importantly, people, October 18th, Tell Me Who I Am on Netflix. I promise you, this will be one of the most moving documentaries you've ever seen. Ed, I cannot thank you and the boys enough for coming on the show today. Much love and success with the film, and it's going to change lives. I absolutely believe that in my heart.
Thank you. It's a great privilege to talk, and thanks for showing such interest in the film. It really means the world to all of us.